Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to discuss about Rimuru's Elegant Escape. This video contains spoilers, so with due let's get continue. Rimuru's Elegant Escape Play, 18. 4 days after Rimuru's escape, Diablo and Sui were preparing to leave the kingdom of Ingratia. They were in the middle of investigating all of the western countries, but as they would not be traveling through teleportation, they decided to put it off for now. Because of this, Sui made several clones and sent them to each territory so that they could investigate more efficiently. On top of that, he had also mobilized their subordinates. Normally, it would be better to take our time in the investigation. Yes. However, we have an idea of who is behind all of this, don't we? Yes, I have an idea. I think that we would be wasting time by going to the west side. Besides, it will be troublesome, Sui. I don't agree. This is the information department's fault for being negligent and missing accurate information. Hehehe. But we are not so familiar with financial issues, so I don't think we can be blamed for not seeing how important that information was. However, well, maybe you're right. Even if we missed it, he would have noticed it, I think. Exactly. So there is no problem. If anything, there is reason to start moving now. That's how we should look at it. Yes, exactly. For Diablo and Sui, not being able to reach the person who was behind it all was not necessarily a problem. This was because they were sure that as long as they identified the unnatural flow of money and figured out who or what organization was responsible, then they would eventually see who the mastermind was as well. Rimuru's command to them was that they remove the corruption from the academy. So that meant they had to investigate to see which schools were corrupted and then remove any corruption they found. Thankfully, they had not seen any sign of corruption in the Tempest Development of Human Resources Academy. And so they had concluded that they were receiving no illegal financial aid. Of course. Tempest was closely associated with Rimuru, and if they were known to have done something wrong, it would be a huge incident that could not be swept away as mere scandal. As for the Ingratia Academy, only a few of the noble teachers were involved in corruption. As it was very light, it was a level where they could deal with it themselves. They had already made a list of these aristocrat teachers who were accepting funds, and so Sui's clones had arrested them in order that they could trace where the money had come from. They would use every method, power, authority, money, people, and things to push the enemy to the brink. It was a direction that you might call a money game. However, Diablo believed that the money was not coming from the western countries. The empire to the east, from those loyal to the old emperor. That was where Diablo's suspicions lay. And they had received a report to support it. That morning, Moss had contacted them and told them that the situation had suddenly changed. All of the students were safe, but a group of them had formed a Humanity Emancipation Alliance and left the others. And they had attempted to kill any teachers and talented students that got in their way. With the situation as it was obvious what needed to be done. Just in case, they decided to have Sui's subordinates continue their investigation of the eastern countries. They finished the procedures and had 2 airship tickets prepared for them. And after that, Diablo and Sui headed for the Nascan Amria Mulmaria Eastern Alliance Union Empire. And 6 days after Rimuru's escape, Diablo had entered the NNU Magic and Science Investigation Academy alone. Sui had sent out his clones into the immense territories of the Empire, and it was from there that he gathered information. He had gathered much information in the past 2 days, but this was the first time they had made contact with the NNU Magic and Science Investigation Academy, which was the most important thing to do. Sui did not like that Diablo was to go alone, but ultimately, he accepted Diablo's reasons for it. You won't run wild over there. Hehehehe. You're really persistent, Sui. They had argued, but in the end, Diablo was able to get this most coveted role. The sofa was simple but comfortable as he sat on it and brought the tea to his lips. He had arrived on the first airship that morning, and so it was still about midday. Why, Lord Diablo? I have heard the rumors. You are most esteemed among great demon Lord Rimuru's subordinates. It is a great honor. Heh. Hello. It seems that I won't have to introduce myself then. You must be the headmaster. Yes. My name is Godama Silver. I am in charge of this academy. The person who appeared before the relaxing Diablo was a nicely plump and noble-looking man. He looked like he might have been muscular at one time, but age had caught up with him, and his waist was starting to grow thick. However, His eyes were very sharp, and he exuded energy from his whole body. The staff he carried was not to aid him while he walked, but it was a high-quality magic rod used to control magic. It looked rather plain, but upon appraising it, it proved to be most unique. In other words, he was either rich or very capable. Perhaps he was both. Surely, he did not think I would not notice it. Diablo was a little confused, but he did not show it. Diablo was wondering why anyone would come before him while carrying a weapon. He could understand why someone might be cautious, but holding a weapon meant you were resolved to fight, and that suggested you actually believed that you could win. He didn't want to think that this man was so stupid as to think that this disguised weapon could fool him, but if that was the case, he had made a big mistake. After all, it would mean that such fools were a part of the human resources operation within the three great academies that Rimuru cared so much about. In any case, coming before Diablo with a weapon was outrageous in itself. While Diablo rarely did so, this time he decided to hold back his impulses and discuss the subject at hand. Yes, you have done good here. Lord Rimuru is very excited to see the growth of the students. It is an honor. By the way, on what business have you come here today? Yes. Well, I happened to have heard that there is a trend of revering nobles within the school. Diablo smiled beautifully as he stared at Godama. I know of it. Indeed, there was a request from the Ingratia Academy. It was suggested that the students learn how to deal with nobles before being sent out into the world. And we thought that this opinion had enough merit to be taken seriously. Oh? Was it accompanied by financial aid? Taking advantage of the equality of the three schools like that will result in their ideal losing all substance. Am I wrong? Diablo looked at him as if he could see right through his skin, and yet Godama did not seem to be moved as he replied. And so Diablo had continued bluntly. Ha ha ha. It is true that we received funds, but that is a separate matter. In fact, it offends me greatly that anyone could suggest that our opinions were bought. Please refrain from insulting us further. I believe that learning about how to act towards nobles is necessary. That is why I agreed to it. Godama explained. His face had become a little red, but he was still composed. It was true that the nobles of Ingratia had offered funds for research, but it was not related to the talks between the three schools. That was what he was insisting. Diablo nodded. Even when looking at him with his demon eye, he could see nothing unusual in Godama's breathing or heartbeat. He was either saying all of this from the heart, or there was an entirely different motive for accepting the money. Yes, for instance, putting the blame on the nobility of the Ingratia kingdom, etc. Diablo had already looked through Sui's investigation data and confirmed that Godama was not suffering from a lack of funds. All of this suggested that the latter theory was the correct one. There wasn't likely much more to be learned by talking with Godama, and so Diablo asked his final question. We'll talk about that in depth some other time. I have just one more question. The thing is, something rather important has happened. He prefaced, then Diablo laid out the scenario that he and Sui had agreed upon. It was a made-up story that he had repeated many times at the Tempest Development of Human Resources Academy and Ingratia Academy. On the surface, it was just some entertainment for the great demon Lord Rimuru, while in fact it was training for the students. And so the students had to be protected, and they explained to everyone that there was no need to worry. But things were different this time. We had already contacted you about that before, so you must be aware. But this is where things are different. The thing is, we have lost contact with them. He said, then inspected Godama with the demon eye. What? Is that true? Godama asked in amazement. But in spite of his words and attitude, Godama was quite calm. So he isn't moved at all. In other words, he knew. I see. Anyone else would have been fooled by his acting surprised, but it did not work on Diablo. Godama was a former warrior who had conquered many trials in the past, and he had a personality that was not easily shaken. That was the kind of man he was, and now, he had made a terrible mistake. If he wasn't surprised, he should have accepted it and moved along. But acting like this had made Diablo's suspicions turn into conviction. Perhaps this just meant that this was the limits of Godama as a man. At this point, while Diablo didn't think Godama was the mastermind here, he did believe that he was part of the Humanity Emancipation Alliance. Godama's mistake was thinking that he could fool Diablo. He would protect himself with an expensive magic item and toy with Diablo with a skill he had honed over the years. He would lead him into thinking the nobles of the kingdom of Ingratia were the enemy. That was what he thought, and it would end up leading him to his ruin. Stop reading at pirate sites that steals translations. Check novel updates. Com for legit fan translations. You aren't surprised. Could it be that you know something? Diablo continued to smile as he asked this. Ha ha, ha ha ha. Lord Diablo, what are you? Godama finally looked a little flustered. At the same time, he seemed to have become aware of that fact, and it shocked him even more. He was supposed to have been perfectly protected by magic, and yet with Diablo in front of him, it seemed to not have any effect. Such were the anxieties that plagued him. And it was true. As Diablo said, Godama had been informed of this news earlier. Just this morning, Magnus and the others who were his comrades, had sent him a long-distance message. It was a simple message that contained the information about the crime at the survival place and data showing their location. There was also a rescue request. On the 7th day, in other words, tomorrow, they had plans to meet a mysterious pair known as the Greed Circus. They would defeat these two and steal their airship. However, there was a possibility that they could fail and the ship would be damaged. It was also possible that the Greed Circus had more than 2 people, and so they wanted reinforcements as well as a rescue team. That was the summary of it. Within this report, there was a line that said that they had gotten rid of those who would interfere. It was because Godama had read this that he understood the meaning of Diablo's question. If this whole abduction was done spuriously under the great demon Lord Rimuru's orders, that meant that the Greed Circus were working for Rimuru. And as long as they acted under their watchful eye, it meant that the great demon Lord Rimuru would have been notified of the events. This information had to be relayed to his comrades who were yet unaware. It was when he had been thinking this that Diablo had visited him. This was bad. Very bad. Godama panicked. The likelihood of him being suspected was very low, that was what he had thought, and yet he had still brought his magic weapon as a precaution. It was the Staff of Heart Protection that he had carried for many years. As long as he carried it, his heart would be protected. He had been so confident in that fact. And yet now, the effects of that magic had been lost. And there was enough reason here for Godama to lose ability to think calmly. While this was happening, Godama received a message from his secretary. Diablo's energy is estimated to be at 7,000. Godama saw the message and returned to his usual calmness. The archdemon who had plunged the Empire into the pits of terror many times over in the past was at about 10,000. And so he had used a machine that calculated the energy of others to calculate Diablo's energy. And just now, he was informed of the results. 7,000, that was quite strong indeed. However, it was not so strong that he was unbeatable. In fact, the Empire boasted royal knights who were strong enough to kill archdemons alone. What, so the rumors were just rumors then? I had heard that he was beyond comparison with archdemons, but that is hardly true. So this is what I was afraid of all along? He is nothing. Still, at least it means I need not fear. And with that, Godama smiled mischievously. And then he signed the order that would mean his own execution. Immediately. Lord Diablo, no, Diablo. I think I want you to die right here. He. Is that a joke? That pompous slime who calls himself a great demon lord seems to have stretched himself too thin. I think it's time we cut some of it away. Don't worry, I'll make up some excuse, so you can die in peace. He turned to Diablo and said exactly what one should never say to Diablo. Thank you for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe.